Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, in this episode, we're continuing our discussion that we've had for the last 3 Mondays on kind of going through the backlog of questions that listeners have submitted to us. These are some great conversations with some great questions, and I feel like I wish we'd gone through them earlier, but I like that we're getting these answers out to the people who've reached out over the last few months and said that these things are important to them or they're curious about them. On this episode, the first question that I want to kind of get to is this idea of competing priorities in the workplace. And so a listener reached out to us a few months ago and asked about strategies they can use to keep people engaged and performing and working hard with there's a growing list of distractions and competing priorities. And I think it's a very relevant question because, I think a lot of it is driven by technology. I think in a lot of organizations, the access to technology and the access to communication is allowing employees to be inundated with things that are not work related, even while they're at work. And the kind of meshing or melding of we used to talk about work-life balance. There is no work-life balance anymore. There's just life, and work is part of it. And those other things that are going on in a person's life are going on whether they're at work or not. And so those distractions and competing priorities can absolutely lower employee engagement. They can lower productivity. They can lower a person's buy-in to doing great work while they're there. But I think a lot of leaders go about this the wrong way because the actions they take is in the spirit of trying to eliminate those distractions, competing priorities, rather than acknowledging their existence and trying to work through them. And so I think it's a great question because it's not going to go away. The distractions and the competing priorities are going to continue to grow over time. They're not going to get less.
Yeah, and I think it's for a while things have always existed, obviously.
Right.
And even when we talked about like our culture acronym, like one of the elements of that is like what we call lending air support, which is, stopping so much of getting through to the team around distractions and things that would take them off course on, the focuses of the work that you have them doing. I think today, though, what's different in this space is where there are so many distractions coming from so many different places. And I think the things that are happening around the workforce and just kind of where we're at from a society standpoint in social media and how much time we spend kind of in those spaces discussing those things. Like there's a lot more of that I've seen now than ever before, where it's just like there's so many things that can shift our attention. And again, not only just workplace distractions and maybe sometimes like too many strategies or competing priorities at work or, things that are happening that may pull our attention away from a professional work environment, but just the world and society in general is creating a lot of, ways to pull all of our attention. And it happens to all of us. And I think that, in those types of spaces, taking the time to engage human to human, taking the time to not just get to know people, but talk to people daily, have pieces of your interactions that have to do with them and life and the journey of life that they're on and things that are going on, like that element of personal connection. I think human personal connection, I think is so important to be able to create a space where sometimes like just being at work is a distraction from everything else going on outside of work.
Right.
And like, so it's almost kind of like there's a connection here. There's a space here. There's a capability of having a shared goal and work in progress to get something done that can feel, satisfying when it's complete. It could feel, maybe tough to get through, but at the same time, you're doing something with others that are also focused on the same goals. Like, I just think that there's a lot of intention to be had now, specifically with connecting with people in a very different way that allows them to feel seen and heard and empowered while they're at work. And I think those are, to me, like the pillars of engagement right now and kind of going forward.
Right, right. So this question can be interpreted two ways because growing workplace distractions and competing priorities. The distractions could be not work related. They could be coming externally. They could be coming from a text message that shows up on your watch from a family member who has an issue that maybe 30 years ago you may not have even seen until 2 hours later or 3 hours later, and now it's instant. And so the kind of the arrows that are coming in from all over the place, all of which can make an employee feel like everything is the priority. And when you feel like everything is the priority, then one of two things happens. Either nothing is the priority, or you try to make everything the priority and you either burn out or you get frustrated or you end up half-assing everything because you can't put your all of your efforts into one thing that you're focusing on. So that's the first part of it. And then workplace distractions, it comes from I'm thinking about the quote from Office Space, where he sits down with the Bobs and he's like, I have 8 bosses. And they go, eight, Bob, 8 bosses, And it's like, yep. There's so much kind of separation of a lot of roles and support roles within organizations now that you might have one, in most organizations, you're only going to have one straight line to one boss, but you might have dotted lines to 5 or 6 other people who each have their own list of priorities. And if you are feeling this pressure, honestly, that's on your leader. So if you're thinking about it from the standpoint of you as a leader, because everybody, if you're a leader of people, you also are on a team and you have a leader too. So from your standpoint, your responsibility is to make sure that doesn't happen as much as possible for your team. And so if the person who reports directly to you also has several dotted lines to other people who are reaching out to them, it's important that you as a leader reach out to all of those people, not to the employee directly, but to all the people who might be talking to your employees, and make sure that they and you are on the same page with what the priorities are. And that nothing is blindsided. So, if you have people reaching out to your people directly, you don't want to stop those interactions from happening, but you want to make sure that there's absolute clarity between you and your employees on what the priorities are, so that when they hear something from other places and they think, oh, I guess this is a priority now, that their first thought is, you know what, let me talk to Lorenzo really quickly first, and let's make sure that this fits within the structure of the priorities, because then it's on the leader to make the call. And if your employee comes to you and they're feeling all of this pressure coming from other places, and you provide them clarity and say, no, don't do that right now, this is what you're focusing on, you can't just hang them out to dry either. Once you've done that, you have to go to the person who's reaching out to your employee and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I told them this because I don't want you to think that they dropped the ball for you. This was my call to do this because this is what they're focusing on right now. And we'll do our best to get that in also. Or they come to you and you say, yeah, I like that idea. You can focus on that. So either way, you have to have the kind of relationship with all of your people that says that when they hear something that doesn't seem to fit in with the conversation you've had with them about what priorities are, that they want to seek clarity on those issues, as opposed to just thinking, no matter who gives me anything, I guess I have to do it all now, because that's a great way to burn out your employees. And so kind of being that line of defense for them and taking that weight off of their shoulders, I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's such an important part of leadership, and it always really has been, to be able to take on the things that will just create noise or distraction for your team. And you have to be aware of them. Like you also have to be in a place where you understand what is noise and distraction. And I'll let you in on a secret. That noise and distraction might be really important to somebody else.
Right. Your noise and distraction is their number one priority.
Yeah. Let's call it what it is. Yeah. Like that's going to happen sometimes, and you've got to figure out a way to navigate that relationship or that strategy, or not write somebody off, but like help them get what they need, but by making sure that you're not continually just rolling down those requests to your team constantly and giving them so many other things to think about and to go do, when you've got them hyper focused on the things that are really, really important. And so like that's, I think, from a lot of leadership standpoints, like where I see leaders have a hard time, is like it's not tough to keep my team focused and attuned to the goals that we have. It's what happens when there's other people that are of other areas of authority or a job, like bosses or bosses or somebody in this part of the work. Like when people are vying for your time and attention, and for your team to get things done or to get information or data, that ability to navigate those relationships and still make sure that other people in the organization get what they need,
right?
In a way that's helpful so that they can achieve their goals, but not putting your team at risk of being distracted because there's so many things they have to get done. That's where I see a lot of leaders sometimes struggle, is that it's tough to, they either want to say yes or they want to say no.
Right.
And then try to figure out, how do you say yes, absolutely, but no, not this way.
Right.
It's kind of like the magic in figuring out that behavior.
Right. Well, maintaining relationships is not just about saying yes. So if you're a leader of people and your boss reaches out to your people directly to talk to them about something that is a priority, your people might think, oh, well, that came from my boss's boss, so clearly that's a priority. That isn't necessarily the case, because hopefully your boss came to you first and said, hey, I'm going to be talking with your people and this is what I'm going to tell them. And you and your boss can align on something before those conversations happen. You can't always rely on that happening, though. And so you as a leader of people need to feel comfortable going to your own leader to say, hey, I've been hearing this. I just want to make sure that are you changing what the priority is? Because how I'm talking to my team is based on the conversation we had 2 months ago on what these are the priorities are, but they're hearing something different from you directly. So do I need to change what the priorities are? Because, and then if your boss says, well, no, yours is fine, and then this is what's happening too, then at that point you have to say, okay, well, let me make sure that we're clear on what the bandwidth is of what they're doing and what the realities are of what they can get accomplished versus what they can't get accomplished. And you need to have a realistic kind of thumb on the pulse of what that looks like, and not just saying no for the sake of no, because if they can get something done, that's a great way to strengthen relationships. But if what they're being asked to do is contradictory to something that you've put in place, that's where the problem can happen. Because if employees believe they're being asked to do two things that aren't just competing with each other from a time perspective, but they're competing with each other from an actual outcome perspective, you will have a team of people who starts rolling their eyes at what they're being asked to do and telling their own story about, oh, well, here, yeah, how do we do this and this at the same time? Like you're saying that the most important thing is sell, revenue at all costs, and then somebody else saying, no, we don't want to discount anything. It's profits at all costs. It's like, well, you don't get both. Like you can't have both. It's one or the other. And if you want to say that both is a priority, then that's fine. But you have to understand that neither is going to be at the highest level because they're taking into account each other as they're rolling through those priorities. And that's a very simple, stupid example of it, but it happens all over the place where an employee can think, I've been told to do two different things here, and it's actually not possible to do both because each one is it works against the other. And so I can only focus on one of these two things, even though I have time to do both. It's not a time thing. It's they don't live in the same universe together because they can't. And so that conversation is different than the one you have about, well, how much time do I have and how many things are being added to the plates of my employees. They both cause problems, but they require different conversations between you and your leader to make sure that your employees are on the same page and that nothing kind of shakes that foundation of the core of what they are here to do. Whatever their job is, that needs to maintain at the top spot is whatever those core values or core focus areas are.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1 Minute Hack is all about communication. When you have a discussion with your boss and you align on priorities that you have to then give to your team, send a follow-up email kind of relating back what the conversation was about, what the priorities were, what you agreed upon, what the goal is moving forward, and the actions you're going to take moving forward to get your team aligned on it. So you can look back at that and make sure that what you're doing is in spirit of that. If your boss wants to change that, then it's important that you have that information to say, well, this doesn't seem like it aligns with what we talked about before. Does it need to change? And that's fine. And if your boss wants to change that, then they can change that. And then having that communication that says that you're on the same page and that you're aligned allows you to go to your people to say, this is what we're supposed to be doing. It's important that you're doing this every single interaction you have, because conversations can get forgotten, and recapping a conversation, especially when it comes to strategic priorities or what the focus is moving forward. It's really important to be able to bring that information up later on and say, we're operating under these guidelines that we discussed and agreed upon. And that way, if they do need to change, you can at least say, what I was doing was in spirit of this conversation that we had. And then we can change it if we need to change it. Having that two-way communication, both to your people and to your boss directly, is the best way to make sure that your people don't feel like they are on the receiving end of competing priorities. This work is done in advance of those priorities. If you start from a standpoint of just hoping it works out and then reacting to them when they happen, you're going to be reacting to them all the time. People don't know what they don't know. And if your boss is reaching out to your people, or if you have a peer somewhere else who has a dotted line, directly to your people, and you haven't spoken to them about what the priorities are, then they think they can just reach out to your people and start throwing things at their plate. Maybe they can. But it's important that you reach out to them in advance and say, hey, this is what I'm working on with my team right now. This is what the priorities are. If there's something that you need to get done that doesn't align with these priorities, I'd appreciate if you reach out to me first before just throwing something at my team. And that's a great way to make sure that you stop it from running into a potential where the relationship is degraded by having those conversations in advance. And then they're more likely to respect that interaction and then not reach out to your people directly with something that competes with the priorities you've put out to your own team.
Yeah. I think communication, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like really, and especially with those that are, from a work standpoint, looking to gain the attention of your team. And that's really what we're talking about, is like, where's the attention going? And what do you need them to focus on? And a lot of middle management, to a degree, is a lot of this job.
Sure.
Of like, what are the organizational things that are important and focuses that you want to make sure are getting done? Then what's your boss's preference on how that gets done? Then what's the other partner's preference on how that gets done? Like, a lot of it is navigating these types of things. And to your point in the hack here, like, that communication is absolutely critical.
Right.
And you have to spend some time saying, hey, like, tell me more about that, or help me understand what you need specifically and when you need it by. I want to make sure that my team is, fully focused on this thing that we know is a priority that we're getting done, but I want to get you what you need. So give me some more details. Let me know what this looks like, when it needs to be done by, what information. Like, let me really understand what you're asking for. And then let me figure out how I'm going to get you that info while keeping my team fully focused on the larger tasks that we've got going on, or the major priorities that we've already established, or whatever that might be. But that's going to be the critical part of being able to get both things done.
Right. And keep in mind too that influence and getting things done that you need to get done looks different if you have a direct line to a person who reports directly to you versus if you have a dotted line. So it's one of the reasons why I think there's so much value in being put in positions where you have to lead and influence people who don't report directly to you, because that's a way to show whether or not you people not just respect is the wrong word, whether or not you are good at creating disciples or followers in terms of the values that you hold, is whether or not people want to follow you when they don't have a direct line to you. And so people who are reaching out to your people who don't have a direct line to them, but they have a dotted line to them, throwing out different things and saying that these are priorities, they have a tough job. because they have to get people to get the job done that has to get done without those people reporting directly to them. And that's a tougher thing to do than if they were just, that's your team and you're the boss and you can have them do what you want them to do. And so being respectful, or at least cognizant of that, and understanding that that you want to preserve not just that person's belief that their role is important in the organization, but preserve the relationship that exists between them and your people. Because the more open communication that your people have with everybody in your organization, the better it will be for them, because they'll strengthen their network. They'll be in places where they can get more experience to get more things done. So it's not about hiding them away and preventing it from happening. It's about making sure that everybody is in agreement with what the core priorities are, whether those change weekly or monthly or quarterly or annually, but whatever they are, and agree upon that, so that if something has to be contradictory to it or flies in the face of it, that the conversation happens in advance and you don't set people up for failure by thinking, all Lorenzo's doing is stopping me from getting the stuff that I need to get done because he's not letting his people do the things that I need to get done. If you've gotten to that point, it means you didn't have the communication to begin with, and you need to go back a few steps and kind of level set with what that looks like and what those interactions need to look like going forward.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.